Hi, welcome again to Off the Page. I'm Leslie Choice. My guest this week is Regina Coupar. She's an artist, a visual artist, a painter, and also the author of 3 books on spirituality. Hi, good to have you on the show.
Hi.
So we're going to talk about lots of things, both visual and related to the word. But let's start with the idea of intuition. How important is intuition in the things that you create?
Well, I think it plays a really big role, but in different ways. Sometimes, two basically different ways. Sometimes you use intuition before you start, and so you use it to kind of plan out where you're going. And other times, you plan your work as you go along, so you're not really sure where you're going with it, you know. But I think in either case, you have to pay really close attention, you know, to what's happening inside, if you want the vision to be something that is uniquely your own. I think that's one of the things, you know, with originality in artwork. It comes not from trying new things.
So it's not necessarily a logical, rational process always.
I think it can use that as a tool, but what it's really about is getting to know who you are, because you are the original, not the thing that you're trying to say, because somebody surely said it before, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's how you say it, how it gets filtered through you.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly it's hard to come up with a new idea, but the expression of an idea can be original. Yeah. Now, the subject of your paintings and of your books are spiritual ideas. Do you think that mystical experience and artistic vision are the same thing, or very close to the same thing?
Well, I think they're really close, and that's kind of what I'm working with. The idea of right brain experience, right brain thinking that is linked to making art, and of course that's not a scientific term, but a term that's just applied to a certain mode of perception as a creative mode, as distinct from the logical linear
This is
mode.
the right brain
The
does
right
that
brain.
for us.
Yeah,
the right
that's
is connected to the left hand.
Yeah,
Somehow,
well, yeah, but
sort of across everything?
yeah, and in terms of scientific research, there are all kinds of things you could talk about. But really, it's just having a name for certain ways of perceiving information that's important for the artist. And I think that when, as an artist, when we get into the right brain mode, we are essentially in the same place where a mystic would be during a mystical experience. And so art provides us with a really easy entry point into that space.
So something is happening while you're sitting creating the art, or viewing it as well?
I'm not so familiar with viewing, although I certainly have had profound experiences, for example, viewing a Van Gogh painting at one point being reduced to tears, which really surprised me. So there's something going on there. But I think it's the creation of the artwork, the just sort of the altered state of consciousness is really what it is, you know, while you're producing the actual work.
Do you lose yourself while you're doing it?
Well, I like to think of it as finding myself while I'm doing it. The you know, levels of self, we're so attached to the ego layers and sort of what we're doing right now, the interaction with other people, and sometimes we become attached to that so much so that we don't recognize that that's maybe not all of who we are. There's something else besides.
And art is part of that process of discovery.
Yeah.
Now, are there actually some shapes and patterns that are more spiritual than others?
That's interesting. I'm not sure about that. Now, Theosophists, of which Kandinsky would have been a theosophist, and let's see, who's the Canadian, Lauren Harris. They think that thoughts have physical form and physical shape, and theosophists over the centuries who have studied that have tried to use those in their art to portray certain kinds of messages. I haven't really looked into it that deeply, but I think it's really interesting.
The new book project that you mentioned that you're working on, The Art of Soul, I believe it's called, it focuses on a kind of training of a person as an artist to make this fusion of art and spirit. What sort of things do you tell a person? What can you tell a person to set them on that path?
Well, this particular project, this book, takes an ordinary sort of introductory art course and breaks it into components, and then tries to look at how you can use the tools of art to or to apply those tools to spiritual development. So, for example, there's a chapter on composition. Well, when you're a visual artist, you have to learn about perspective. Well, what is perspective? Well, that's my point of view. So when I look at you from this perspective, I see you only this way. However, that's not the only perspective, right? So I could move around the room or stand, up there or something and see you differently. So we learn about that, and we learn about balance. And balance is basically how do you make the components within the image relate to each other in such a way that it's coherent and it causes your eye to stay within the frame of the image, these kinds of things. So if you look at perspective, what is my point of view in terms of my spiritual life, and what path might I choose? I think, I would hope, there are certainly more than one path that we can take. So you sort of think about that, and then the elements of balance. How do I balance my life? Perfect symmetry with everything lining up just so, or an asymmetrical kind of balance? Asymmetry is not non-balance, it's just a different way of doing it. So it seems to me that there is a great relationship between the two.
Mm-hmm. Now, are dreams important to you as an artist, or if you're talking to someone about the creation of art, what would you tell them about using their dreams?
Well, I use dreams in different ways, and I think they're important, first of all, because I think that they link you with your unconscious self, and so they provide material about yourself that maybe you'd just rather not bring to the surface or can't bring to the surface. And they also provide great material content for images. I mean, Chagall painted his dreams, and beautiful color images of floating figures and horses and things like that. So I think that historically dreams have been important, and
it's a rich source of all kinds of possibility.
Yeah.
You're right about mystical experience, and your paintings concern mystical connections. How does an individual tell between a mystical experience and a pure illusion?
Well,
why does there
have to right? Why does there have to be a difference? I think that part of the problem we have with the term mystical experience is that it seems to be connected to religion, and so people are sometimes not really wanting to go there. But what I'm trying to say is that mystical experience is an everyday occurrence. It's something that artists tap into on purpose, right, so that we can do our work. But it also happens to people, any sort of altered state of consciousness. So it could be having sex is a mystical experience. It could be the feeling, the overwhelming feeling that you get if you're walking near the ocean, or a sense of peace that just sort of comes out of nowhere. All people experience these things, but I think that linking them to mysticism is not what's commonly done. But I'm saying I think we should do that.
And it's an everyday thing. It's not like Paul on the road
to Damascus.
That's
right. No.
Well,
it can be. But think about it this way. I mean, the feeling that we get that I'm calling mystical, it's really fleeting and really intense. I mean, people who are suffering trauma, death in the family, things like that, sometimes they get this overwhelming sensation of calm in the middle of everything. And it's very fleeting. Maybe it has after effects, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it was just for that moment. But those are everyday things. It's sort of like Paul's Damascus experience, sort of shrunk or that sort of thing. I think they're the same. I really do.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we're in some ways trained not to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
I like that Zen Japanese word satori. Just sort of the momentary awareness that happens for no particular reason whatsoever. Yeah. If you don't have that word to attach to it, and you have that feeling from the waterfalls or the sunset or whatever you see, you just sort of go on and say, well, I don't know what that was, but I guess it wasn't very important.
Right. Well, we have things to do, and culture teaches us that our culture teaches us that we need to make a living, and we need to do certain things and pay attention to those. And while some of that's necessary, some of it just kills the soul.
Yeah. Mm. You write about reconnecting. How was it that we got disconnected?
Yeah, really. I think that as children we were far more connected, and I think we learned not to be. I think children naturally have mystical experiences. They don't question the way that we do. They enter the experience itself without bringing all of their skepticism. I'm not saying that skepticism is wrong. I think it's actually a good thing in a lot of places. But I think that we have that as children, and we learn to dismiss it. We learn to get on with the business, you know, the things that are going to make us money, make us important, make us whatever it is that they've told us, you know, our culture that we need to do. So when we reconnect, we're not, that's why I like the word reconnect, because we're not inventing something new. We're trying to get back, peel off those layers and get back to that, find that crystal again.
I notice you're rather critical of education for replacing, as you put it, creativity with strategy. I hadn't thought about it quite that way. What's wrong with strategy?
Well, I'm very cynical.
Okay, tell me about it.
Because strategy implies that you have a goal at the end, right? So we strategize about what we're going to do and how we're going to get there. And we can use our creative tools to do that, but creativity without any sort of end result in mind, just the exploration, that's what leads us to soul development. That's what allows us to reach beyond the borders, because we find things that we don't expect. I mean, when we strategize, we do the same thing, but we know what the goal is, so we dismiss all of the other things, right? But in terms of just creativity, art for art's sake allows us to explore, and when we do that, I think that we build up creative tools within ourselves, and we become not better at doing this, but just more creative individuals to do all kinds of things. And I don't think that our schools really take that seriously. You know, axing programs, of course, the visual art, that's the one that bothers me the most. But music follows, and yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's rather sad. We have some of your paintings here with us today that will be shown on the screen. I'm wondering if you can take me through the process of creating one of your favorites, or something recent, or something like that.
All right. Well, there are different processes, as I said, and you can plan them out, and I have some examples of different ways. So maybe the first one that I'll point out is Persephone, an image of a goddess, and she's over here.
Yep.
And
tell me about that one.
well, she sort of arrived out of a dream. That's why I bring this one up. And I had been thinking for a long time about Persephone and other goddesses for a show that I was working on, and I couldn't seem to get it together. And then one night I had a dream, and it was sort of like a dream. And the next morning, within an hour, I had sketches for all of these images, and Persephone is one of them. So what I try to do when that happens is I try to stay as true as possible to that original idea as it unfolded in consciousness. And so, you know, if there's any note in my journal about color, well, I stay with that color or those lines or whatever. So this one was sort of created that way. And then I decided to add a haiku to it. And when people first look at this image, they think that there's another language written beside the figure of the woman. And it really isn't. It's a simple haiku, but instead of placing the letters in a haiku order, I took out all of the spaces between the words and just put the letters in the haiku form, and just to show us how sometimes, you know, we're used to looking at things a certain way, and it's really hard to look at them a different way.
So it's a matter of readjusting the viewer's perspective.
Yeah, yeah. Another image is the bird image, that firebird, I call it, and this was the result of thinking about tidal pools. I really love the ocean, so going along and taking photographs of tidal pools, and because you can see designs in them, sometimes angels with wings, or, you know, if you've got a good imagination, it really helps. And so in this particular case, the photograph shows the actual tidal pool, and the bird just sort of emerged from that. I mean, now that you see the image, it's hard to look at that and not see the bird. But if you're just walking along the beach and you're seeing all of these marks etched out in the sand, you know, you can walk by a lot of them and not really see anything. So that's more of a spontaneous kind of method. And it's not about copying the tidal pool. Yes. It's about trying to recapture the feeling of seeing that for the first time and seeing that bird in the sand. So allowing the paint and the colors just sort of lead you back into that moment.
Okay, my guest today is Regina Coupar. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Off the Page. My guest is Regina Coupar. Now, not all of your paintings and artwork are happy, bright, cheerful. Do we need that darkness? Is that an important part of the element of creativity?
Well, you know, I think it is. And I don't know that it's a matter of needing the darkness, it just is. You know, it's like sort of the Taoist approach, it's just there. And so if we negate it, then I'm not sure what it is that we're creating, some sort of illusion that's not really true to what's actual. So I think that we do have the darkness within us and around us. And, you know, art again provides a really good example of that. I mean, if you have a painting that doesn't have dark or light, well, all right, if the painting's in black and white and there's no tonal change, you can't see anything. You know, if it's in color, you could see the differences in color, but not the differences in tone. And so we have, the world is dark and light. And so I spent a long time sort of exploring the dark images, and I like to think that I'm finding more balance now. I've done sort of happy work for a long time, and then I did kind of sad work for a long time. And I think that the more recent images show a greater sense of balance.
For the spiritual artist, or the artist interested in things of the spirit, is despair an important part of the discovery of the journey?
Again, it's part of it. If you miss that, then you've missed an important element of the human experience. You know, St. John of the Cross was a mystic.
Dark night of the soul.
Dark night of the soul, right? And he talked about the need to enter the darkness for what it is. You see, we go through despair, I think, in our lives, trying to get through it, to get back to the good stuff.
Sure. We want to be happy again.
Yeah, right. And John of the Cross said no. He was sort of an Eastern thinker for a Western person. But he would say about that, no, the darkness is part of the human experience. So feel that, because if you were not a human being, you would not feel that. You would not be able to feel that. So don't negate it. Just enter into it and see what it has to offer. And of course, in his words, he would say, all things come from God.
Yeah, whereas our tendency today is, you know, get down to the doctor and get the pill and, you know, make me feel good again.
Yeah, really.
That kind of thing. What do you learn when you study religious art, traditional classical art? You know, the masters have been creating, you know, paintings, religious themes, biblical themes. What do you learn when you see them? Well,
that's a very interesting question. I don't spend a lot of time looking at that historical art. The emphasis is very different from what the kinds of things that I do. The emphasis for most of that was narrative. They told stories, and so they interpreted stories. It's the creative process itself that I'm interested in terms of connecting to spirituality. And I think the closest you can find in terms of a historical connection would be the icons, the icon painters in the maybe 6th century or so.
What were their images like?
Well, their images were fairly flat, a lot of metallics, and the image I spoke about earlier, of course, has metallic colors, reminiscent of iconography of that sort. But they would, these were artists who were designated to paint religious themes, and they would fast, and they would go into sort of a trance-like state, and they would try to portray these images. Some of them would be of Christ or of the Trinity, and those were sort of common themes. And so, again, it was the spiritual element connected to the process, and I think that's what interests me the most.
Have you tried that? Have you tried fasting and going into trance-like states?
Well, I don't fast. I don't have the willpower for that. But
yeah,
I do this now, which I really like. I create rituals at the beginning of a painting
For
time.
example, what would you do?
Well, for example, I like to look at the space that I'm going to be in, so it can be anywhere, and mark it and sort of see where the sun is, if I can see it, and where the directions are, north, south, east, and west.
Yes.
I like to think about the natural elements, and if possible, I like to sort of light a candle and you know, sort of welcome the light into my painting session. I've actually tried it with writing now too, although that process is a little different for me. But what it really is a centering technique, you know, to sort of say, okay, this is where I am right now, and I'm going to focus on this project, and I'm going to let the rest of the world just sort of melt away. So. It works.
That's very interesting. Yeah, no, I can see the use of that ritual and sort of recreating a personal geography and to take you to that place from where the creativity will work. Is ego a part of it? Does the artist still need a fairly strong ego to assert and say, I am the creator of this work?
Yeah, the narcissism thing. I think
Oh,
that...
you don't like ego then?
Well, no, I do, because I think it's sort of two levels, that on the one hand, we don't want to paint our images so that people will like us or agree with what we say. It's more important to say what we think is real or what we think is true. So in that sense, we need to get, I think, beneath the level of ego to get, really to the heart of what needs to be said and say that, not what I think you want to hear, right? Or what you'll buy if you're a visual artist, that sort of thing. But on the other hand, you need some sort of sense of what I have to say is really important, because it takes incredible time and energy, all of these resources, and if I don't believe in that, then I'm not going to be able to apply myself to get the task done.
What if somebody looks at your painting and just doesn't get it?
Now, that happens all the time.
Well, I know, but I wonder about that with that,
Yeah.
that communication process with artists, though. What do you think when that happens?
Well, I wonder what they are getting. I mean, sometimes people will just sort of not like it. Well, that's a reaction. That's stimulating something. Sometimes they don't get it. I think a lot of that is to do with the lack of exposure that people have to art. We
Yes,
don't know how
we're
to
not
think
very
about it.
well
Unless it looks like, a cougar or something, then we don't really know how to relate to it. So I think that's part of it. But you can, if you get over that, you can enjoy the color. There are lots of things. You don't have to get what I put into it or what I'm getting out of it. And often the way people respond to your work teaches you something about it, a little bit more about what it's, some sort of extended meaning that you didn't maybe think about.
Right. Where are you right now as an artist? What kind of things are you creating?
Well, I'm playing with media, and I like that. So I'm doing mono prints, which are working on glass and trying to create images that way. Monoprint means sort of one print as opposed to a lithograph where you could maybe do 20 or 30.
Yes.
So I'm playing around with the media and enjoying that. And in terms of content, I'm sort of a project person. So the next area that I really want to explore is my heritage, my Acadian heritage. I'm an English-speaking Acadian. So I'd like to use my art to explore that.
That sounds very interesting. We're going to take a real short break here and be back in 1 minute. You've been watching Off the Page today. My guest is Regina Coupar. Do you see yourself as a Christian artist?
Oh, good question. I think that I'm an artist first, and that I understand Christianity very differently from how I used to. I will not dismiss the title. I still find myself having leanings in that direction, but in such a way that I suppose it's hardly you'd hardly think it's the same religion in terms of the classical understanding of what that means.
Yes. And you said somewhere that we are all artists. Do you still hold to that, everybody?
I do, and I think that the more we get to know who we are, the more we can bring that art out, and then it's really just a matter of technical ability, and anyone can learn that.
And you'd also said that, I'm quoting you here, pride is the greatest enemy of spiritual progress. I think that's a good point.
Yes.
And thank you for that. Regina Coupar, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
And thanks for watching Off the Page. I'll see you again next time.